I know my combine driver is going to be pretty mad at me about a month from now when he has to harvest this mess. I can't use the language that I expect he's going to use that day because you must remember this is a kid friendly channel. Well, it's pretty obvious that this video session is going to talk about lodging in winter wheat. It's been the worst year in my recollection. I don't think in my career I've seen the widespread degree of lodging across many wheat fields across a significant geographic area that we've had this year. And it's really a shame. I think for us locally, we were looking at some pretty awesome wheat yields. We had some big heads here that are really filling well. Peter Johnson talks about how his head counts per square foot are greater this year than some years previously. Joanna Fallings, provincial wheat specialist, was telling me last week, and I can see it in these plants that I've got here too, that tillers were extremely well developed, good head size, and a little bit more, certainly more consistent in size than we're used to seeing. So those two things by themselves, assuming that you didn't get droughted up there back here in June, but those two particular traits that we've witnessing and seeing this year in this crop kind of indicates, I think, certainly for us locally, and again, I don't know about the rest of the province, but here in our little world around St. Mary's, there was going to be some pretty nice wheat yields. That story has completely changed now in a bunch of fields because things have gone flat. People are saying, well, what's asking me, well, what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is that, unfortunately, the plants that are at the bottom of this mass, literally, they're just going to get shaded. The leaves are going to get shaded. The sunshine won't get to them. So they won't have the same opportunity to create photosynthesis, keep that factory humming, keep that photosynthetic factory, as I sometimes call it, keep it pumping at maximum capability, just because they'll be laying in the shade. So it's going to take some weight out of it. Quality-wise, it's probably not going to affect things a whole lot from a quality point of view. Other than obviously test weight will be probably a little bit reduced, which cuts into yield. But combines today can scoop up flat wheat. The operators don't like it, but it's not the first time we've had a bit of flat wheat, certainly. And there's always areas in any geography on a certain year where you get a mass downpour, downdraft on a localized little spot that causes some standability issues. But they say widespread, this is by far the worst year. So it's taken a really good wheat crop and creating something less than ideal. But why this year? Why is it so much more widespread? Why is it so flat? Far more than anything we've seen for a number of years. Well, I think that to maybe put this into hockey terms, since we're kind of in the Stanley Cup finals here, I think they're going to start tonight. Put this into hockey terms. Of all the inputs that we put onto wheat crop, and there's a number of them: fertilizer, planting date is something, it's not actually an input, but it's management choice, phosphorus, nitrogen, base fertility, manures. Those are all offensive inputs that they're put onto wheat, and wheat responds exceptionally well to all those inputs. It is the most management responsive crop that we grow. So quite often, the more of those offensive inputs we throw at a crop of wheat, the better it responds. A little bit like Austin Matthews. You turn him loose, he'll score a ton of goals. That's what nitrogen does to a wheat crop. Builds the plant and gives it its maximum ability to fill kernels. Other inputs that we use, more so on the chemical side, are defensive in nature. In other words, they protect yield. Herbicides keep weeds from robbing fertility and yield out of the crop. Fungicides protect the plant from leaf disease, from fusarium head blight. And briefly, in terms of fusarium head blight, there's really very little. It would be obvious now whether there was any amount of fusarium intercrop. This year, fusarium is not an issue, so we don't have that particular thing to worry about. The fungicides did their job of protecting it, you know. They're like some of those little Montreal Canadian wingers. They've done a tremendous job of keeping opposition kind of off balance. But the new tactic this year that was in play that some folks have used are the plant growth regulators. Motus is the popular one. Those of you that don't know what Motus is, it is a plant growth regulator that's meant to go on just as the weed is starting to joint and lift upwards. It's meant to stiffen the straw, keep it standing. In other words, protect us from this kind of thing. It's kind of like Shea Weber on defense. When the time calls for it, he takes that 2x4 that he calls a hockey stick and jams it up the backside of the opposition forward and reminds them that he wants to think twice about venturing too close to the crease and creating troubles for our all-star goalie, Carey Price. So that formula this year, the formula that seems to work in terms of standability at least, is a formula that includes a combination of, well, I'd say moderate nitrogen rates, certainly rates that are probably more in the 100 to 130 pound range. It includes, if you push nitrogen rates, it does include the plant growth regulator like Motus. Motus is not perfect. It stung wheat back when we were putting it on in some fields, or my neighbors are putting it on back the 1st of May. It beat wheat up from a leaf burn point of view considerably. Going around and talking to my neighbors and customers that have used some Motus, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but on average, there's no question, on average it has improved standability in the fields where high N rates, extra management have been those types of techniques have been employed. It has helped the standability portion in those fields. So in other words, it has done that defensive task of allowing that plant to continue to push carbohydrates, continue that photosynthetic factory, keep it out in the sunshine, and keep pumping carbohydrates and starches into these nice heads, and will ultimately make some pretty nice wheat. Is that the formula that's going to work going next year? Well, if we think back to this whole thing in terms of nitrogen, this year it was so dry through May and April. That nitrogen that we applied in April and May was just sitting there still right on top of the ground. It hadn't gone anywhere. There was no rain in May and April. It hadn't moved it down in the soil profile at all. In fact, back in the end of May, we could see wheat that was suffering somewhat from nitrogen unavailability because it was still up on the top of the soil and the roots are going deep for moisture. When that rain then, those first showers started to come through then, during the last few days of May, first week in June, some got more than others, but we all kind of got the 3/10 of an inch. I knew at the time, I said, that's going to make a wheat crop if it continues a little bit. But I never kind of thought or considered the impact of all that nitrogen being sucked up by the plant literally at that one period. And it's why you see nitrogen overlaps just stick out like a sore thumb every year. Nitrogen overlaps are with us every year. This year it's by far more prominent and easy to see. Last week you could see the streaks of overlaps that are set by GPS systems. You know, you had a 2-foot strip that goes the full length of the field and it's completely flat. Those strips are there every year. And every year it's rare to actually notice that they are present. Think about it. In a nitrogen overlap, you're putting on, if you're 150 pounds of your base rate, you're putting 300 pounds on that overlap. This year, it seems like where we used 150 pounds as their base rate, maybe a little bit more, that it's literally acting as if it's 350 pounds the way this wheat has lodged. The lodging this year is pretty much predominantly due to nitrogen in my view, and it's just too much N being sucked up too quick. On a more normal year, where we get that more uniform moisture, April provides some rains, May provides a few rains, we do typically here, standability due to excess nitrogen likely isn't going to be an issue. So in that respect, it's kind of like the rules will change a little bit next year. The formula that worked this year that includes some of Shea Weber's cross checks, next year conditions change, officiating changes. Some of those cross checks might end up putting them in the penalty box. You won't contribute near as much sitting in the penalty box. Modus is going to kind of be one of those things. It will become a management tool that we'll use. We'll use it somewhat judiciously. We'll have to reevaluate that almost every year. It's not going to be quite the slam dunk that fungicides are. Fungicides, like I said, are extremely effective at controlling diseases. We always have diseases that we have to be cognizant of. Fungicides produce those. Standability. There's a lot of years. Standability is not an issue, but Modus may allow us to even shove those end rates even higher than Mr. Johnson wants us to go, and in those environments, maybe that has a place. But we'll learn that going forward. Next year is going to be a different season. The Montreal Canadiens formula for success this year probably won't work next year. Things are going to be different, and you're not going to be able to take a pop gun offense, combine it with fantastic defense, and take you to the promised land. That usually doesn't actually work. You need a combination of the two, much like Tampa Bay has, to be consistent winners. However, first game's tonight. I don't know if I'm going to watch it or not, but it's pretty hot out here, so I might sit down here later on and at least catch a part of it. Folks, have a great week. It's other than the wheat crop, everything else looks really good. So we've always got things to be thankful for. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.